Retro now.
Hello everyone, this is Dennis. Just a quick note before we get started. This was originally going to all air as a single episode, but as we recorded it, it rapidly became apparent this was going to be the longest episode of Podcast Stardust ever. So I've cut this into 2 episodes. You're going to hear the regular introduction and then the first half of the conversation we have about the Phantom Menace. And then I will cut it off at about halfway through, and then we will get your usual outro and that type of information. And then on Friday, we will be back with the second half of the conversation. Thanks for listening. On with the show.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continuously unexpected. So uncivilized.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And this episode marks the conclusion of the Phantom Menace series. But before we get to that, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found around the internet.
Of course, we are on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust.
The dish is aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So before we dive into this episode, here in the United States, we are getting ready to celebrate Thanksgiving. So a happy Thanksgiving to all of our American listeners. I know Canada had their Thanksgiving a few weeks ago, so I hope that was a good one as well. But yeah, that'll be tomorrow, the day after this one comes out. But yeah, Jay, we've done it. This is the final episode in our nearly year-long series covering the Phantom Menace in our 10 to 15 minute segments. This is also the longest episode of Podcast Stardust we've ever recorded. There was a whole lot more to say than I thought there was going to be as we got to these last 15 minutes of the movie. But it's a fun discussion we got coming up here.
Yes, absolutely fantastic. It's always great to dive into these, and we definitely dove in very deeply.
In fact, we did. So, well, it's already going to be a long episode, so let's not waste any more time and dive right into it. This is part 11 of the Phantom Menace series. So we are thrilled to be joined once again by Aaron and David from Star Wars Reactions. Guys, welcome back to Podcast Stardust. How are you doing this evening?
Well, thank you so much for having us and for the invite. It is it's an honor to be invited back and to talk about the Phantom Menace, which is just such a fun film to kick off the prequels, and it's a great movie and a lot of good things in it. And plus, it's always great to talk to you and Jay all the time. I love y'all. Y'all are awesome, and it's good to be back and hearing some friendly voices.
Oh, shucks. Well, that's sweet. Dave, how about you? How are you doing?
Oh, great. Like, ditto what Aaron said. It's always fun to talk to both of you. I did my homework last night and I listened to episode 798 where you guys had Craig Dickinson and Tom Gross on, and that was a lot of fun. That was awesome. And so I love that we can piggyback off of them and get to talk to both of you. Like Aaron said, it's always a joy to talk to both of you.
Well, thanks. The feeling is likewise, for sure, guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
They get to come back if they're going to keep showering us with compliments like this.
I know, right?
That's the idea.
All right. Well, why don't we go get this kicked off? And as usual, on these segments, we start off with some questions about our guest's experience with this film. Jay, you want to start with our first question here?
Sure, absolutely. So we always start off by asking our guests to tell us about your first experience seeing the Phantom Menace. So do you remember where you saw it, who you were with, and what your initial reaction was? So Aaron, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Well, my first experience with the Phantom Menace is a little on the lame side. I did not catch it in theaters, but I did. My first experience watching it was I went out after it was released and bought this gift pack set that they had that came with the VHS and it came with a book of the concept art and a basically a film cell from the movie, and I got that, and that was the first time I had seen it because I was not I was overseas when it came out, so I didn't have access to it.
Mm.
So it was great to be able to finally see it, and it was mind blowing. I still wish I still haven't seen it on the big screen yet. I need to, but I've only
Oh.
seen it on TVs, and watching it on my little 23-inch screen back then was incredible. I can only imagine how it would have been seeing it on the big screen itself. So
Mm.
Which film cell did you get in your package?
it was the N1 fighter flying out of the hangar. It was just outside the hangar. You could see the castle and the tank that was shooting at it. So it was from right there at that scene. And I honestly, I wish I still had it. It's one of the items I lost in the Hurricane Milton flood.
Aw.
So that's that is gone.
Oh, that's a bummer.
But yeah, that was heartbreaking. But it was a fun memory either way. So I had it, and it was a beautiful cell.
I'm glad you brought that up. I forgot completely about that. I had that same set that you're talking about, and I want to say my film cell was Darth Maul on his speeder bike.
Ooh.
I
Yeah.
Oh,
want to
wow.
say that because he was so small and so far in the distance on that cell. It's just like a little black dot, and otherwise it looks like it's just a shot of the desert there. So, but yeah, I wore that VHS out when I got that
Oh,
set.
yeah.
But yeah, David, how about you?
Yeah, no, I did see it opening night in May of 1999. I was with my fiance, who became my wife. It was in Tampa, and we were with friends, Jeff and Michelle Wilk, friends of ours from Michigan. And I just remember standing in a really long line.
Hmm.
Nowadays, you don't have to do that, but but it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. I'd seen Return of the Jedi opening night, so 16 years later, got to see this opening night there. So pretty
Wow.
cool. Yeah, and I was thinking about this when I was listening to you guys talk to Craig and Tom. Was in 2012 the 3D version came out, right, back in theaters,
Mm-hmm.
and so I took my son to that. A bunch of our guys, we took our sons. My son was 8 years old, seeing a Star Wars movie for the first time on the big screen. I was 8 back in 1977 when I saw the first Star Wars movie on the big screen. So the Phantom Menace was holds a special place for me. It's pretty cool.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
I love those kind of pass the baton sort of stories. Those are my favorite.
yeah.
Definitely, definitely. All right. Well, then the next question we have is, what is your favorite scene from the Phantom Menace? So, David, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, I've been thinking about this. The whole fight scene between Maul and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, but there's a part where Ray Park as Maul does this whirling dervish side twist,
Mm-hmm.
then goes down, picks up part of the battle droids and throws it against the wall and opens that door, and then they go in there and they battle inside of that really cool setting at the core of Theed. And I think that became more and more of a favorite for me because Aaron and I hit up a lot of Star Wars weekends, and Ray Park came down several times, and I just remember being there on the main street in Hollywood Studios and watching Ray Park with no no black and red mask on, no horns, and he just starts flipping around, exactly like he did in the Phantom Menace. And you watch him do it, you're like, oh my gosh, this guy. This is years after he did that. He could still do it. You're
Mm-hmm.
talking 2012, 13, 14. I mean, unbelievable. Years after. So I've always loved seeing him do that on the screen, but also in real life, watching him flip around. So that's maybe my favorite, and really just the whole last lightsaber battle.
Oh,
Oh,
fantastic. Yeah,
I'm glad you have for
it's
this segment then. Yeah.
yeah, I was just gonna say it's perfect that you're on here for this segment then.
Yeah,
Yep.
definitely.
And Aaron, how about you? What was your favorite scene?
There's so many great scenes in this movie. But to me, the one that always sticks out in my head, besides the fantastic choreographed fight that David was referred to, actually is just a bit of a comedic element when they're in the jungles and they're meeting up with the Gungans after they've returned from Coruscant, and all of a sudden Padmé steps up. She goes, "No, wait, I'm the queen. This is my
Mhm.
bodyguard." And Obi-Wan kind of turns and looks at Qui-Gon like, "What?" He's got this bewildered look on his face that's just absolutely priceless. I'm like, hey, that it still gets me each time. So I'd have to go with that being one of my sinfully delightful pleasures from the movie.
Yeah, and then that knowing smirk that Qui-Gon gives him in return
Yeah,
is
like
is fantastic.
he's like,
Right.
you hadn't figured this out.
Oh my gosh.
Right.
I love always hearing about what resonates with everybody, and it always makes me smile to hear
Mm.
these different reactions that
Mm.
everybody has. That's awesome. So, our last question, kind of ping-ponging back and forth here, is who is your favorite character in the Phantom Menace? So, once again, Aaron, we'll start with you on this one.
You know, if you ask me, Star Wars in general, one of my favorites is Obi-Wan Kenobi. But from this film, it's Qui-Gon Jinn. I absolutely love the character of Qui-Gon. Just the way he was portrayed, the way he carries himself, the air of confidence, but yet gentleness as well, is just absolutely a bewildering character. I mean, he's got such a such a charismatic draw to him that I just cannot watch the movie and not love Qui-Gon.
Mhm. And I'll tell you, one of the first things that I thought of when I was rewatching this segment as well is just the fact that truly Qui-Gon is the first real Jedi Master in
Mhm.
his prime that we got to see on screen.
Yes.
So
Mm.
it is definitely something very compelling about that,
Yeah.
for sure, for sure. David, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, Qui-Gon is, I mean, he's so cool. But I'm gonna go a different route than Aaron, although I agree with him. I'm gonna go with Maul. I loved it. Like I said, I think my love for this character grew as just seeing Ray Park in real life and interacting with kids there at Hollywood Studios and seeing his interviews. In fact, um, Dennis in the episode with Craig and Tom had mentioned that whole story about the lightsaber hilt for a double bladed lightsaber, and he shared that up on stage. That he said it was too small; he had to get longer. And like Dennis mentioned in that episode covering the previous 10 minutes of this movie, that they actually listened to him, and so it's just really cool to see his part in it, his skill, what he really brought, and up the ante, and what George wanted is to really make this so much more intense and I don't know, skilled than even what we saw in 1977. So
Mhm.
I love the character. I love what Ray Park brought to it. Wish he wouldn't have gotten. A lot of people wanted to see him move into the episode 2 and stuff like that. I really did as well, and wanted to see more of him. But I make a strong argument for Darth Maul.
Awesome.
Yeah, I kind of think it's one of those Boba Fett type situations where if George Lucas realized how well received he was going to be, then perhaps he would have in fact made it to another film. But
Agreed. Agreed.
yeah, yeah. All right then. Well, then let's get into the segment. We are starting at 1 hour, 54 minutes, and approximately 40 seconds, and we're going to be going to the end, to the credits on this.
Mm.
And we start at Theed Palace. We've got Padmé and her guards fighting the battle droids. Captain Panaka blows out the window, and then they climb outside and use their ascension guns to get to a higher level of the palace. And when they get up there, Padmé shoots out the window on the higher level and they enter. Okay, I was watching this segment very, very carefully, and there's a continuity here that occurred to me for the first time. I don't know if this is
Mm.
widely known or not, but I discovered it. There's 8 people that use their ascension guns to go up to the second level. Yet once they get up there, a little bit later, we'll see 10 people come through the window. Um, Did anyone else know that,
Really?
or am I just discovering that, or am I late to the party?
This is brand new information to me.
I'm actually
What about
watching
you
that
guys?
scene right now.
Ah.
I'm counting people. Yeah, there are 8 that just went up.
Mhm.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh yeah, there's 10.
Wow.
Whoa.
Good
Good
eye,
catch.
Dennis. Wow.
Good catch.
Oh, man.
And it's a split second that you see those 10 too, because it's a real quick cut
Mhm.
at that
Well, and
point.
then later in the segment, you'll see 10 running down the hall.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
the only reason I noticed this, if I'm being honest, is because, well, everyone knows I like to torture Jay with Phantom Menace questions eventually
Yes.
on this.
Especially the
And
number questions. Now I'm going to remember.
exactly. And so I counted them, and then I was double checking it when they got to the one down. It's like, oh, how about that? So anyway, continuity error aside, what does everybody think of this innovation of the ascension gun? So, Aaron, how about you?
It kind of figures they would have something like this in Star Wars. We see the jetpacks with Boba Fett. We see the rope shoot out of his gauntlet and everything in Return of the Jedi. So it's a natural progression of the technology at that point. Why not have an attachment that shoots a rope up and pulls you up? So it was cool to see. But honestly, it didn't really surprise me that they had that technology to do so. It kind of just makes sense, honestly.
And David, what do you think of it's kind of a diversion from this, but what do you think of Padmé as this like mission leader in this sense? So we recently talked about in the novelization of this book about how Anakin kind of has this vision of her as a and leading an army, and it comes to fruition here in this final act of the movie. But what do you think of her as kind of the warrior queen?
Well, it really helps set the stage for Leia, right?
Mhm.
I enjoy seeing it. I always I struggle with I guess she's what the queen. I think any king or queen being on the front lines, there's always a struggle right in your head about this concept. On the other hand, when you see that, that means everything to the people, right? You're like, okay, you're equal, you're no better than us, you're out, you care just as much as us. So I always enjoy seeing that. I think I don't know, I don't have any problems with it, I guess. And I guess it's part of back to like when you mentioned the ascension guns, I think about Flash Gordon, I think about those old serials, and that's where we are. And you guys mentioned that, like I said, with Craig and Tom, it's like, wait, this is fun. This is Star Wars. So guess what? You can have your highest ranking people out on the front lines if you want. It's Star Wars.
Mhm. And I think that's a fantastic observation about Padme being like Leia in that way. And that's what
Mhm.
always struck me too, especially in this scene, because
Mm,
it's very matter of fact. There is no hesitation. She's very calm and she just knows that this is what she has to do. Whereas me, I'd be like, you know, fearing I was going to fall off the edge of the, of the windowsill. You know what I'm saying? But she just did what she had to do. And that's exactly what Leia would have done.
Yeah.
Indeed, indeed. Yeah, I like the way that they use Padme, Amidala, whatever you want to call her,
mm,
right now, in that she's a smart, capable queen. She's very young, and so she's dealing, from a little bit from an experience aspect on that. But they give her uh, some believability, I think, with some of the action that they put her through in there. She's not
mm,
taking the place of a Jedi. She
mm,
is, she came up with a very clever plan, and she knows that castle like better than anybody. And so, who
Mhm.
better to lead them through there and come up with these plans? So, anyways, I like that as well.
mm.
So the action moves to your all's favorite characters, Darth Maul and Qui-Gon Jinn, plus Obi-Wan Kenobi, and they are fighting their way across the platforms that are in those, I guess, like that plasma mining area below the palace. Uh, Obi-Wan gets a kick to the face from Darth Maul and gets pushed over the side. He manages to catch another platform and dangles for a bit before pulling himself up. And then what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Qui-Gon smacks Maul and throws him off to a lower level. And then goes for a finishing blow by jumping down right after him, which Maul manages to evade. And then they run to, I'm not sure what exactly the appropriate term is, but to the shield gates that close, with Obi-Wan in pursuit after he jumps up to their level. And they come to a screeching halt as Maul makes it past the Beyond Gate, and Qui-Gon comes up just short, and he begins to meditate while Maul paces around. So this is setting up the very final confrontation that we'll see here in a bit. Aaron, what did you think about the way, and we're going to keep coming back to this fight, at least twice more. What do you think about the way that this fight was set up between Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan? This portion of it, I should say.
Well, this fight is legendary in Star Wars. You talk about top lightsaber battles from the saga. This is going to be in everybody's top 5. And it is just that well choreographed and that well executed. But what I love about this fight in particular is the pure difference in battle techniques between good versus evil in this, especially when they get separated by that ray shield, and the pacing back and forth that Maul does. He's just seething. You could see the hate and the anger just seething out of him, while Qui-Gon just drops to his knees, closes his eyes, and just refocuses his energy and his strength and calms himself down. And then what's even more captivating about this moment is you have Obi-Wan trapped several gates behind, who is almost a combination of the two. He's still on his feet. He's got his lightsaber in his hand, and it takes him a minute before he turns it off, but he's just he's there. He's on edge. He's not, you could tell the focus isn't 100% there because he's not where he feels like he needs to be. And it just adds another dynamic to an already incredible battle that we get to witness.
David, what do you think about it?
Well, Aaron hit it. Like I can't help but think about. I always say it's Maul is stalking. He's like a tiger, right? Just that back and forth motion. So I do love the contrast between it, and I have to think, and I guess here's kind of a question I wonder is, and I know we're going to get to it here in just a little bit, but it's almost like you do need Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan together on this because you're dealing with something you haven't dealt with before.
Right.
And so, I don't know, it leaves a lot of questions in my mind. Why obviously Qui-Gon is trying to center himself and calm himself, but it still doesn't do the trick, right? And I'm not sure if it's how do you prepare for that, right? We talk about it in sports, right? Like you can try to prepare, but when you play the best people, it is tough, I can't help but think about, I can just hear Sidious saying your anger makes you strong, and that's what we see happening in Maul as he paces back and forth. But I love this. I love this battle, and again, I think I'm just curious if they would have, if Qui-Gon, he probably would have lived if Obi-Wan wouldn't have been separated from him. But that's all part of the story.
Okay, you guys keep anticipating my questions here. I was going to ask someone about
Okay.
Obi-Wan
Sorry.
observing it, and then no, this is fine. So before Jay jumps in, I'm going to ask her this question because you started to touch on it at the end, David, which is, do you think, Jay, it was deliberate on Maul's part to retreat back there and get the Jedi separated so that he could take them on one-on-one?
Ooh, that's a great question. I almost think it's sort of a happy accident on his part because I don't know if he actually had an opportunity to really peruse the environment to know that could have happened. But I mean, perhaps, because that's something that would definitely have worked to his advantage for sure, is to try to get them separated. But I'm not sure if he went into that thinking that and planning that, or if it was just, in his regard, maybe the will of the Force on his side. But I do want to say something really quickly about what Dave just said with fighting against Maul and this being something new. And I was thinking about that as well, to your point. is
Mm,
that, this is the first time in a
mhm.
millennium that the Jedi actually went up against a true enemy with a lightsaber. It was always that they were scrimmaging against each other, if you will,
That's right.
and so this
Mhm.
is the real deal. And I think that was part of the reason why Qui-Gon was so deep in meditation, is because he was searching for the answers of how to deal with this. But yeah, so I had to touch upon that. But getting back to what you said, Dennis, I'm not really sure what the answer is to that. I don't think he planned it, but maybe. But what do you
Mm,
think?
Well, I'm going to make an aside to answer to respond to your side.
Yeah.
It's the first time in a millennium that they know of, because we just
mm,
saw in the
Yes.
Acolyte
Yeah.
they fought a Sith,
Right.
mhm.
but all
Right.
the
Right.
Jedi
Right.
who encountered it died.
Mhm.
Um,
So no one
okay,
Mm,
knew that they did that.
right, right,
Yeah.
we're on the same
um,
page.
yeah.
I guess my thoughts on this were, what was Maul's intent when he kicked Obi-Wan in the face? Did he really think
Mhm.
he was going to kick him to his doom? Or was it get him out of here long enough so he could try and take Qui-Gon on one-on-one?
Mm,
And then maybe there was some luck in retreating into that area. I don't know if he knew about that area, but he did find some terrain that benefited him, and then he did get that advantage of getting them separated. So, anyways, there was at least an attempt to separate the two, and he then fought them one on one after he managed to do so. So,
Yeah. Although I will say too, just real quick, that Maul was so excited to be able to, at last we will reveal ourselves to the Jedi, that I
mhm.
think he would have relished in the fact that he was fighting two at once. So I don't think that it bothered him one way or another, but I think he would have welcomed having both of them, just to be able to say that he did.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
Wow.
to expound on that, I think you're exactly right. He relished the idea of revealing himself to the Jedi, and when he had the opportunity, he was taking on two Jedi. He was very overconfident in what he could do,
Mhm.
and you start to see that as the fight goes on. His overconfidence is giving the Jedi the upper hand, which is about the time he kicks Obi-Wan off. And I think that was more of a, not necessarily a planned thing to do, but it was a survival issue.
Mhm.
Okay, let me get rid of one so I can handle the other, and then I could try to get back. He realized he was being outmatched, because Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon
mm,
together were a cohesive unit, and they were taking it to him. He was
mm.
holding his ground, but he wasn't going to be able to hold his ground forever. And I think he was trained well enough to understand that. And I think just falling in that tunnel just happened to be a lucky spin for him at that point.
Mhm.
Mm, mm,
Yeah. And I'm also thinking back to earlier in this movie, before this entire fight started, Sidious told him to go for the Jedi first, and then you'll find it won't be too hard to get the Queen after
Mhm.
that.
mm,
So I don't know. I feel like he must have had some sort of a plan there, whether, and he probably had contingencies built into contingencies. But man, I feel like we could do an entire episode on this, but we got
Right?
to move
Oh, I
on
Oh yeah,
because
know.
absolutely.
we still have a huge chunk of this section to go. All right, so we head out to the outskirts of Theed, and we've got the Gungans taking on the battle droids, and we arrive just in time to see the shield generators get destroyed. Tarpals issues a whistle, and the Gungans all start to retreat. The droid tanks charge in. Poor hapless Jar Jar hides under a cart, hauling some, depending on which translation you're looking at, boomers or boomas, and he accidentally pulls down the gate, and the cart rolls away, and those boomas come bouncing out the back, and they take out a tank and disable some other droids. And then the next thing you know, he finds up himself clinging from the cannon on a tank. When Tarpal tries to help him, by giving him Booma, he loses control of that, hits the driver, and there's a big crash, and they both fall to the ground as Tarpal or Jar Jar cannot successfully make the jump. So this is as good a place as any to talk a little bit about Jar Jar. David, what do you think about our hapless hero of circumstance, Jar Jar Binks?
Hapless or crazy like a fox, right? Yeah,
Nice.
really. Sabumas. I wrote that down in my notes. Yeah, this is. I was thinking about this again when I was listening to you guys' previous episode. Um, And I was thinking about the age that I'm at in 1999. I'm 30 years old, and I'm 8. And so I have to tell myself that, right? It's even George said it, I make this for 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old boys and girls.
Mhm.
And that fits perfectly, the comic relief of this character and stuff like that. So um, I got a kick out of it. It's fun stuff. It's silly stuff. And it probably is, like I said, comic relief for what's coming up. It's just kind of the darkest moment and stuff like that. So I don't have any problems with Jar Jar. I get a kick out of him, and obviously, I'm influenced too by the story that all of us know in the years since with Ahmad Best and the way he's handled all of it. So, I think he tried his best to make a really entertaining character, a fun character.
Mhm.
Aaron, how about you?
Yes, the Gomer pile of the Star Wars universe. I love Jar Jar's an underappreciated character, and a lot of what you see in this movie is represented is why people don't respect the character as much as they should, because there's a lot of fun and a lot of innocence in the character that we see, and he just gets thrust into global or galaxy-wide politics and galaxy-wide implications just from wandering through a forest. And so seeing him, he's not a military man. We really don't know what his background is outside of what they tell us in this movie, where he was just exiled because he was clumsy. So I mean, seeing him, be thrust in as a combat general, and then of course having to make decisions, and then of course hiding and running away, it kind of fits what we see about the character, but he's a little more complex than that, I believe, in the long run, and we see that through the rest of the movies, and of course what we see of him later on in the Clone Wars and stuff. But he was for as heavy as this movie could have been, and as dark and as heavy in details as this could have been, he was a very much needed character to provide a lighter side to such a incredibly what could have been incredibly dark and traumatic ending to the movie.
Mm.
I agree with that 100%. And anyone that knows me or has listened to this podcast for any length of time knows that I am a Jar Jar apologist for
Mhm.
sure. And for me, I don't think that he's any different than, I mean, if you think about the Ewoks in Return of the Jedi, there was that one Ewok where he was trying to throw the little like bolus thing with the string or whatever you want to call it, the vine with the pebbles on the end of it, and then it ends
Yep.
up getting wrapped around himself. And, people say, "Oh, that's so cute. Oh, ha ha ha." And then Jar Jar does the same thing and people are like, "Oh,
Mhm.
really?" Kind of a thing. But I'm with you, Aaron. The levity was absolutely needed
Mhm.
because I mean, David, you said it. I mean, you were 8 years old when you saw this movie for the first time. I mean, could you imagine being an 8-year-old being like yada 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 trade federation, yada 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 sign the treaty, yada yada yada. You need someone like Jar Jar and
Yeah.
he fits perfectly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Jar Jar just forgets how brave he actually is from time
Right.
to time. I mean,
Well said.
he does some things that take courage, and in this case, it's not like he's the one that led the retreat. The retreat was whistled for, and so he sought shelter, and it didn't work out for him, and then he found himself in a bad situation and did the best he could under the circumstances because everyone else is running away. It's not like he was trying to take them all by himself. He's no
Right.
Dak. So okay. Well, getting back to Theed, we've got Padme and her guards running down the hall, and then they get ambushed by droidicas and battle droids. And Padme tells them to put down their weapons and that they're going to surrender. So, very brief scene here. Jay, give you a chance to start on one of these questions here. At this point, do you think Padme had a plan as to what she was going to do when she got brought over to the Viceroy, or is she making it up as she goes along? Because the plan's already gone awry. They had no idea there was a Sith Lord running around the Theed Palace. which divided up the forces, and they had to split up again when they went from one level to the next. But what do you think is going on in her mind right now?
Well, if you would have asked me this before we got the Padme trilogy of books, I would have said that she was definitely making it up as she went along. And I do think to some extent that's true, but Padme is very, I'd say she's wicked smart. And she kind of knew when she was up against something that she couldn't handle, and she didn't want to sacrifice anyone needlessly, that she figured that something else would shake loose. She knew her people. She knew, the layout of the palace and perhaps the way that things would work. So, I mean, that's the best, that I could say as far as if she had a strategy or not. I think that Padme probably had XYZ plans in the back of her head, of things that could have happened, but she was smart enough to know that at this point in time that there needed to be a divergent plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Anyone else have any thoughts on that?
Honestly, I think Jay hit the nail on the head with that, because I think there was an element of making it up as she goes, but I think but there's also a genius inside Padme that's unmatched, that we see. And I think that as soon as she was captured, okay, well, great, we're captured. All right. Oh, wait, they'll take us to the leaders because we're captured, and they think I'm the queen because I am. So they know where they're going to go, and she knows where they are. She knows they're in the throne room. She knows she has blasters in that throne. So it's a matter of, okay, well, let's turn this bad thing into something good. I know what I'm making. I got these ideas. She knows her surroundings better than probably anybody else in that castle. When it comes to the droid army and the Trade Federation, so she's able to manipulate situations. And now, did she have it planned out where the duplicate queen was going to run up and distract all the droids? No, I don't think she had that planned. I think that was just a happy-go-lucky circumstance at that point. But it played out perfectly because she had a plan to get to the throne room, which is what her goal was. So she just modified her plans as she went.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see that you hit on something I was just about to bring up, which was Sabe was disguised as the queen. And that's not an accident in this case, because they didn't have to have anyone in the Queen's regalia when they showed up for this attack. In fact, you might argue that it's a little bit more detrimental to everything going on in some respects, unless you were planning on that as at least a contingency for everything that was going on. And so, yeah, I don't know that Padme knew that Sabe was going to get up there, but it was fortuitous in that regard.
Well, yeah, and it makes sense too, because if you're planning out an attack and you're going in, and there is the potential of getting split up, you're going to what the majority you want to split their forces up as well. Well, if you got somebody dressed up like the king going to the right, most of them are going to go to the right to capture the queen. That leaves you fewer enemies to deal with. So I definitely think that was definitely part of the pre-plan there, having Sabe dolled up.
All right, so we turn to space, and we've got Anakin and Artoo in their N1 Naboo starfighter with Vulture droids in hot pursuit. They take a hit and they crash land inside the hangar of the Lucrehulk class battleship. David, I don't know about you, but my respect for the N1 went up dramatically after getting to see one in season 3 of The Mandalorian. But what do you think about these Naboo starfighters?
Well, I love them, and I can visualize a young Doug Chang drawing these. When you look at some of the behind the scenes videos, or you see, oh gosh, times where George Lucas is sitting there talking to him, and he's showing him all the design work that he's done for the Phantom Menace. And I love these things. I love how slick they look. I love how they really emulate the smooth slickness of a dragster, and we all know that Lucas is a big racing fan. And it's a neat change of pace from the used universe that we see in episodes 4, 5, and 6.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Aaron, what do you think about the the fortuitousness of that they managed to crash in essentially just the right place on the ship.
There's a lot of fortuitous events that occur in this movie. And this was probably the biggest one of all. I would definitely want to speak to the design of that ship, because who puts the power core in an open space next to a hangar is beyond me. But quite fortuitous. I would say the force was leading him to where he needed to be, whether he realized it or not. And it just happened. Like, let's try spinning. This is a good move. And it's just one of those things. He was a kid, kid doing kid stuff in something he's never been in before. She's probably, I can't help but think it. Hey, I saw this on the web. Here, let's spin, or let's duck in here. But I think it worked out quite fortuitous, because he ended up saving the day by pure mistake, in pure Anakin fashion.
Jay, you're one of the bigger fans of the whole ring theory, and it's like a poem, it rhymes type of stuff. What do you think of the battleship as a stand-in for the Death Star?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's perfect. I mean, you think about even in Return of the Jedi, when Lando had to take the Millennium Falcon on the inside and blow it up from the inside. So it's a perfect little ring theory kind of a thing. And to your point too, Aaron, I have to say that there's a lot of design flaws and a lot of things in Star Wars in that way, honestly. I mean, we've always lamented about the idea that why aren't there any handrails on any of these catwalks kind of thing. It's so easy for someone to just fall off. But yeah, so I definitely think that there's a lot to the whole design of this, from just something like that from the Death Star, blowing it up from the inside, to even just the reference of that.
Okay, so let's get back to Jedi versus Darth Maul. So the shields begin to retract. Qui-Gon springs up and starts fighting Darth Maul. Obi-Wan charges in, but he pulls up short as the shields operate again. And then we've got Maul and Qui-Gon one-on-one with that ends when Maul stuns Qui-Gon with a blow to the head, and then he runs him through with his lightsaber, and causing Qui-Gon to collapse to the ground. And it's followed by the classic scream from Obi-Wan that we got to see in the trailer that led up to this movie for months and months and months. So what do you guys think about this? Did Qui-Gon underestimate Maul? Should he have maybe retreated and regrouped with Obi-Wan? Was this a flaw? Was this a mistake? Or is just Maul just that good? But David, what do you think?
Yeah, no, that you're pulling right into what I was mentioning a little bit before, and I got a little bit ahead of us, so forgive me there. But that's to me, I love how you asked that. Was it not overconfidence, but I don't even think it's an underestimation. I just wonder, again, when you face something that you haven't faced before, it's tough. I keep, like I said, I keep going back to the sports analogy. If you're playing the weakest team in your league, right? Softball, baseball, football, basketball, any age, and then you go to play the best players, male or female, right? In these sports, it's a shock to your system. I've been on both ends of it. Where you're the best team, and I've also had it where I've played the best teams in the state of Michigan, and you're like, the talent level is staggering. And so if you're not used to seeing that, you can get dunked on real fast, and you're posterized. So that's the sense I get. And kind of like, Jay mentioned it and you did too. I keep thinking back to Acolyte as I watch this, and particularly as we get a little bit later towards the end of the movie, I'll bring up the Acolyte again. But I just feel it's when you haven't seen this, it's to Maul's advantage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Aaron, what are your thoughts?
Well, I honestly, when it comes to this, I think honestly, Maul just had the upper hand. He obviously been well trained. So had Qui-Gon, but Qui-Gon didn't have the combat. I don't think had that live or die combat experience that Maul grew up with, and how he was trained. And there's a scene right before there's a split second right before he gets stabbed where they break apart for a second, and he goes into that classic Qui-Gon stance with the saber by his head, and he's kind of looking at Maul, who's kind of back a few seconds with the saber, and there's a look on his face, on Qui-Gon's face, that is like, I can't, and it's almost I don't want to say resigned defeat, but it's a look of, I know I can't win by myself. And so then at that point, that's when he launches that all-out assault, saber over his head, slashing down, which gave Maul that opportunity to stun him in the face and stab him. I think there was a moment of not insecurity, but of doubt in Qui-Gon for a moment, knowing that by himself he wasn't going to be able to defeat this guy, and he wasn't sure when Obi-Wan was going to be in there. And if Obi-Wan got in there at that point too, there was a higher risk of losing Obi-Wan to this guy as well. So he wanted to I think he resigned himself to, I need to end this now before Obi-Wan gets in. And that became his fatal flaw, which led to the fall of Qui-Gon Jinn. And it's just from that glimpse of his face.
Jay, what are your thoughts?
Well, I just love the fact that here we are 25 years later, still having these questions. And I think that's the beauty of Star Wars in a lot of ways, is that it allows us to really explore multiple types of thoughts and outcomes as far as this goes. But for me, I keep thinking about the novelization, and then even going back to the novel Brotherhood now that we have. In that, Qui-Gon does refer to himself, he's getting older and, all of these things. And so, Aaron, I think there's something to what you said there, in terms of it was almost maybe a sacrifice of himself so that Obi-Wan could succeed instead of both of them perishing. So I could see where you're coming from with that. It's a great question, though. It's a tough one to answer.
Yeah. Well, we'll have plenty more opportunities to talk about all this because we're not done with this fight yet. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut off the conversation right there. That'll do it for part 11 of the Phantom Menace series. I will be back on Friday with part 12. Jay, Aaron, and David will all be joining me for that. But I hope you've enjoyed the first part of our discussion. We got a lot of good things left to discuss. And if you have enjoyed this, then please consider subscribing to Podcast Stardust on your podcatcher of choice, and then do all the things like rate, review, and things that help podcasts grow. You know all about those already. Once you've done that, head over to retrozap.com and check out all the other great episodes that are on the network, such as Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Case Files, Animaniacast, Brews and Blasters, Dork Lair, Dooncast, Enjoy Stuff, Love, Death, and Robots Plus, Superhero Suite, and Warp Trails. If you want to catch up with us on social media, we are on Instagram and Facebook at Podcast Stardust. If you want to talk to us in real time, you can find us on the RetroZap Discord. You can find out how to get on that either on retrozap.com or follow the link in the show notes. If you're looking for some Podcast Stardust apparel, then check out the TeePublic store, for which I got a link in the show notes as well. If you want to see what Jay's up to in cosplay, then make sure you check out her Instagram page, j.snipscosplay on Instagram. She's got all the latest and greatest of what she's up to going on over there. So like I said earlier, upcoming on the show on Friday, we'll be getting into the second half of this conversation with Aaron and David. And then on Monday, we will be getting back into the Clone Wars. So with that said, thanks for listening to episode 813 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. For those of you in the United States, have a great Thanksgiving. And until next time, may the Force be with you.